You have not changed. That was the first thought that stabbed through my mind as I stood there, peering at the old wedding photo pinned to our living room wall. I was holding it in my hands, actually, having just taken it down to dust the frame. Samantha, no, back then we all called her Sam, stood radiant in her ivory gown, shimmering with thousands of tiny beads that caught the afternoon sun outside the church. I stood beside her, face stiff with nerves, my best man Michael Jr. behind me, grinning like a fool. In the photo, her eyes sparkled. And yet, I swear, when I look at it now, I see something else. Perhaps a hint of restlessness, a quiet tension behind her smile. It's as though she was already stepping out of reach, even at the moment we said our vows. I can still feel the lace of her veil brushing against my cheek as we kissed for the cameras. Right after the ceremony, her dad patted me on the shoulder, saying, "Well done, son." The reception was a blur. Dancing, toasts, spilt champagne, laughter that rose and fell, unstoppable. That night, I fell asleep with the absolute conviction that our future was ironclad. Nothing could ever break us. Years have blurred those memories, reworking them into half-remembered illusions. Now the everyday friction between us, missed dinners, hurried phone calls, awkward silences, feels more real than those wedding pictures. I once believed a marriage like ours would weather any storm, but I was naive, spinning illusions about loyalty. If only I'd known how quickly illusions can shatter. The first real sign was the bouquet at the door. An expensive arrangement, roses, lilies, those tropical orchids that cost a fortune. I remember stepping outside to pick up the newspaper and finding that floral monstrosity sitting on the porch like a mocking grin. A card stuck out from the stems. Samantha's name was there, but the signature read, James. I froze, blinking stupidly. We'd passed her birthday weeks ago. It wasn't our anniversary. I told myself it must be some professional contact, a well-intentioned coworker, right? But the sense of dread twisted in my gut as I carried the bouquet into the kitchen. It was early morning. Sam was still upstairs, probably sipping coffee in front of the mirror, doing her hair, preparing for work. I placed the flowers on the table and tried not to think about them. But I caught my own reflection on the microwave's shiny door, a tense, grim stare. In that moment, I told myself I wouldn't jump to conclusions. Give her a chance to explain. Maybe it's a business partner, a friendly gesture. But when she saw the note, her face turned a shade paler. She masked it quickly, but not quickly enough. She gave me a half smile. "Oh, those must be from James Connolly. He's part of our marketing team," she said, twisting her mouth in a forced grin. "We hit a big milestone, so I guess he's just celebrating." She didn't meet my gaze, though. She cleared her throat, rummaged in a drawer for some scissors to trim the stems. My eyes lingered on her, hair carefully styled, her blazer neatly pressed, her nails perfectly manicured. This was the Sam I'd known for years. Driven, meticulous, always the professional. And I thought, she's lying to me. The moment that realization set in, it felt like a punch in the chest. I didn't call her out. Not yet. I watched as she placed the flowers in a vase, adjusting each stem with careful attention. Then she glanced at me. "What?" she said, her voice distant. "They're just flowers." But something about her eyes that morning, it was as if a stranger had borrowed them. The memory of our wedding day flickered through my mind, two people exchanging vows, promising to stand by each other. Now, we seemed like cardboard cutouts going through life on autopilot, connected by history, but separated by a gulf of silent resentments. That was the first day I felt genuine fear about what might lie ahead. But I waited. I told myself I'd give her the benefit of the doubt. We'd always prided ourselves on not being that kind of marriage, the suspicious or jealous kind. So I kept my mouth shut. I started paying more attention, though, not just to the flowers in the note, but to the small details. How she typed faster on her phone after 10 p.m. in bed, the time she came home late from the office, but smelled of cologne that wasn't mine. One day, The phone rang while Sam was in the shower. A name I didn't recognize appeared on the screen. I answered it, feeling my heart pound so loud I couldn't hear my own greeting. A man's voice asked for her. I said she was unavailable. The man hesitated. Then, "Can you remind her about tomorrow night? She booked a table at that bistro near the waterfront." My mouth felt full of cotton. "Tomorrow night?" I asked, trying to sound neutral. "Yes," she didn't confirm the time. "Let her know to text me." "Okay." I swallowed. "Sure," I croaked. Then I hung up without another word. I stood there, staring at her phone, my hands numb. At first, I was in denial. We all think we know our spouse inside and out, right? You share a bed, you share bills, you see each other in the raw moments of life. You assume no one can intrude, not really. But eventually, life reveals how easily a stranger can wedge themselves between you, especially when the daily routine has become dull, when resentments lurk beneath polite conversation. That night, I confronted her as she slid into bed, phone clutched in her hand. The dim lamp cast shadows on her face. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Who's James, really?" She went rigid, the phone's blue light reflecting in her eyes. "I told you, he's just a guy from work." "Then why is he calling about a dinner tomorrow night?" Silence. Her jaw tightened. Then she exhaled sharply. "It's for a project, a business discussion, which requires an intimate bistro reservation after hours." She rolled her eyes and turned on her side, away from me. "If you don't trust me, come out and say it." I said nothing. I lay there, feeling the warmth of her back, but also sensing that we were miles apart. That night, I dreamed I was back at our wedding. Only this time when I turned to kiss her at the altar, she melted away into a crowd of faceless silhouettes. I woke up drenched in sweat, my chest aching. A few days later, she came home with the same faint floral scent on her blouse, the one I'd noted on the bouquet card. It just about destroyed me. That's when I started to break. That's when the dream to die planted its roots in my chest. The thought flitted through my mind. Maybe if I just didn't exist, I wouldn't have to feel this constant betrayal, this terrible emptiness. But the next day, I forced myself to do something more practical. I scrolled through her phone logs the moment she left it on the coffee table, noticing the frequency of calls and texts to James Connolly. The pattern was obvious. Nearly every day, multiple times, at odd hours. Once I saw what I needed to see, I couldn't pretend anymore. Everything I suspected was true. My hands trembled when I set the phone down. I confronted her again in the kitchen. She was finishing her dinner, stabbing at some leftover pasta on her plate. "Explain the calls, the constant texts, the flowers, the late nights," I demanded, voice trembling. Her fork clattered. "I told you, it's work. Stop lying." I felt a surge of rage, so fierce I had to grip the counter. "Look at me, Sam. Repeat what you just said." She blinked, eyes flicking up. "What?" "Repeat it." "I want to record this." I pulled out my phone, turned on the voice recorder, and held it out. "Tell me again. Tell me you're not screwing him." She stared at me, lips parted. I could see the muscles in her neck tighten. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she pushed her plate away. "You're being paranoid." But her voice wavered. "Say it again," I repeated, voice low. "Michael." She glanced around, as if searching for an exit. Her gaze shifted to the phone I held, then to me, a slow, trembling exhale. "I'm telling you, we're just coworkers." I watched her, letting the silence thicken. Every fiber of my being wanted to shake her, to force the truth out, but I just clicked off the recorder. "Yeah," I whispered. "That's what I thought." That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was a swirling mess of old memories. Our honeymoon in Arizona, lazy Sundays reading the newspaper together, her laughter echoing in the backyard, as we grilled steaks in the summertime. Now, all of it seemed overshadowed by the present. her phone lighting up with his messages, the distant look in her eyes whenever we sat down to eat, her forced half-smiles. A few weeks after that confrontation, I discovered definitive proof. She'd left her work bag in the living room, the top unzipped. Inside, next to some file folders, was a receipt from a fancy hotel downtown, dated 3 nights prior. 2 entrees, a bottle of wine, a room charge, all under his name. She was listed as a guest. I felt cold as I read it. My skin actually tingled, as though I were standing outside in a blizzard with no coat. The words room charge thundered in my skull over and over. That's when the numbness gave way to a kind of savage anger, like a dam collapsing. She came home late that evening. I was in the living room, lights off, waiting. The seconds dragged. Around midnight, the door opened. I heard the click of her heels, the rustle of her coat. My heart pounded, adrenaline surging, hands sweating. She paused in the doorway when she saw me in the dark. "Michael?" she asked softly. I switched on the lamp beside me, illuminating her. She looked startled, guilt weaving across her face. "Where were you?" I asked, voice flat. My words felt like lumps of stone in my throat. "Work ran late," she answered, too casually. "Really?" I tossed the hotel receipt onto the coffee table. It landed with a faint snap. Her eyes followed it, and her face paled. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I stood, pacing a few steps. Then I turned to her, leaning in so close I could feel her breath. "I want you to say it out loud. Tell me you've been sleeping with him." I need to hear the words. She swallowed. Her lips parted, but no sound emerged. The tension in the room was suffocating. For a moment, she looked like she might try to spin another lie, but the truth was too heavy now. Finally, she mumbled, "I'm sorry." My stomach lurched as if I'd been kicked. The final blow. Rage and heartbreak tore through me, tangling together into something savage. My mind flickered to our wedding vows, the promises about fidelity, about being there for each other in sickness and in health, in good times and bad. I roared inside, a silent scream. "Say it," I repeated, my voice as cold as winter wind. "I want to record it." Her eyes brimmed with tears, but she forced out the words. I've been with him." A wave of nausea swept through me. Part of me wanted to smash every piece of furniture in that living room. Instead, I clicked my phone recorder off. My entire body trembled. My vision blurred. She tried to reach for my arm, maybe to offer some pitiful apology. I pulled away, stepping back so violently my leg bumped the coffee table, knocking it askew. "Don't touch me," I growled. We stood like that for a long time, breathing in the thick silence of betrayal. She wiped her tears, but I felt no pity, only anger and a hideous sense of relief. At least now there was no more lying. I sank onto the couch and let my head drop into my hands. Somewhere in me, a voice whispered that this was the moment my life officially fell apart. Yet another part of me, maybe the stubborn, prideful part, insisted this was just the beginning. That from the ashes of my trust, I would find a way to stand tall again. But right then, all I could do was clench my fists until my knuckles turned white. She didn't speak to me. She stood there a while, then retreated upstairs. The next thing I heard was the bedroom door shutting. Quiet, measured steps. Eventually, I drifted into a bleak half-sleep on the couch. In my dreams, I saw images from our wedding day again, but warped. Her white dress stained with red wine, my father's face contorted with silent disapproval, the haunting echoes of guests clapping and cheering as if mocking me. The next morning, I walked around in a daze. She was gone. No note, no farewell, just gone. Off to work, or wherever. As I wandered the house, I felt this strange emptiness, like the walls themselves were heavier, pressing in. I noticed the flowers from James had wilted on the windowsill. I almost laughed at the symbolism of it. That day, I began to unravel. Part of me wanted to get revenge right away, to break something precious of hers, to shred her clothes, to drive to that James Connolly's house or office and punch him in the face. But instead, I just sat in the living room, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, numb. The dream to die flickered in my head again, like a quiet promise of escape. I called my sister that evening. She lived across the country, but she answered. I tried to speak, to tell her what happened, but the words tangled in my throat. Eventually, I just said, "It's over," and hung up. That was the best I could do. Samantha didn't come home until after midnight again. I heard her rummaging in the bedroom, packing clothes. I snuck upstairs, looming in the doorway. She turned, startled. We stared at each other. "I'm staying at a friend's," she muttered. "James's place, you mean?" I asked in a dead tone. She flinched but didn't deny it. Without another word, she shoved a few more items into a duffel bag and walked out. This time, I didn't stop her. I wanted to lash out, to scream, but all I did was stand there, my heart pounding with fury and desperation. Days passed. She drifted in and out of the house when I wasn't there, collecting her things. I watched from a distance as the home we built together splintered. Our wedding photo was gone, her desk drawers emptied. Even the little figurines we collected on vacations vanished from the shelves. That sense of emptiness grew and grew. About a week after that, I found my composure in an unlikely place, my own reflection in the bathroom mirror. I looked at my tired eyes, the stubble on my chin, the hollows in my cheeks, and a voice whispered, "Enough." That's all it said, enough. So I channeled the pain into something else. Writing was always my skill. Technical writing, yeah, but words were my currency. I started typing, nights blending into mornings, telling my story in excruciating detail. I wrote about the betrayal, the confusion, the confrontation. I wrote about the wedding day and the illusions of forever. I wrote about the dream to die, the nights on the couch, the quiet rage roiling in my chest. It was raw, not meant for publication. But it was my lifeline, the only way I could purge the poison before it destroyed me. One night, my phone buzzed. A text from Samantha. "I need to come by. We need to talk." I stared at the screen, my pulse drumming in my ears. Part of me wanted to ignore her forever, but another part demanded that I face her. That was how I'd reclaim my self-respect. So I responded, "I'll be here." She arrived late, after dark. I let her in. She stood in the living room, arms crossed over her chest. She looked tired, older somehow, though it had only been a few weeks since she left. "I'm sorry for everything," she mumbled. "I know I can't undo it. I just wanted to say that." I nodded, wordless. She stared at the empty mantelpiece where our photos used to be. "I never meant to hurt you this badly," she said, tears forming. "It happened gradually. And then..." I cut her off. "Don't sugarcoat it. You chose him." She flinched. Her tears spilled. "I couldn't live with the distance between us anymore," she said. "We were drifting and I needed something else." "Repeat that," I said abruptly, pulling out my phone again, pressing record. "What?" She blinked. "Just say it again. I want to hear it twice." She hesitated, then repeated, "I needed something else." I stopped the recording. My body shook with a hollow rage. "Well, you got what you needed," I said. "Now get out." She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but she just hung her head and nodded. I watched her leave. If I had been a different kind of man, maybe I would have begged her to stay, or perhaps launched into a flurry of insults. But something in me refused. That pride, that smoldering anger, hardened into a shell. The next week was like standing at the edge of a cliff, staring down at a black abyss of heartbreak. My phone rang off the hook. Friends checking in, her mother leaving tearful messages, my sister urging me to seek therapy. But there was a raw sense of purpose fueling me now, telling me to focus on my own path. I had a plan forming, a last shred of revenge that I believed would restore my dignity. James Connelly worked at the same tech startup as my wife. I had inside knowledge. My old friend Dan was in the same building. He owed me a favor from years back. So, I arranged a little sabotage. Nothing too extreme, nothing illegal, just enough to rattle James's position of confidence. In those days, I also found the DNA test. It was in an envelope on Sam's dresser. I can't say whether she was actually testing something regarding us, or if it was just a personal curiosity. Maybe something James suggested. The result was inconclusive for anything meaningful to me, but it was yet another confirmation that she'd gone behind my back. She was searching for answers outside our marriage, and I was left in the dark. That realization almost made me laugh. Everything about her new life was a secret. My revenge took shape when Dan let slip that James had overpromised on a big client account. This was a huge deal that the startup was counting on. With a few well-placed messages, a couple of anonymous phone calls to the client about the shaky approach James was taking, it all came crashing down. The client threatened to pull out. Suddenly, James's star at the company wasn't shining so brightly. I heard about his meltdown through Dan, who told me that James was storming around the office, barking at people, trying to patch the leaks. Samantha was right there in the middle of it, trying to salvage their project. It gave me a grim sense of satisfaction, imagining them scrambling. Maybe they deserved that swirl of panic. I wanted them to feel a fraction of the chaos they'd unleashed in my life. But real revenge is never as sweet as you imagine. After the initial adrenaline surge, I felt empty again. No victory, just more bitterness. That's when I realized that the only real victory would be standing on my own 2 feet without them casting a shadow over my life. The moment that truly brought me back to myself came unexpectedly. I got a call from Samantha's mother. She begged me to talk to Samantha, said that Sam was drowning in guilt. I almost scoffed. Why should I help? Let her figure out her own mess. But something inside me cracked. Maybe it was compassion or pity, or maybe I just needed to close this chapter decisively. I agreed to meet Sam on neutral ground, a coffee shop near the outskirts of town. She arrived before me, sitting at a small table by the window. I watched her through the glass for a moment before going in. She looked pale, her hair pulled back in a half-hearted ponytail. Her nails chipped. No perfect manicure anymore. A single coffee cup rested in front of her, untouched. I entered, slid into the seat across from her. She lifted her eyes, and I saw tears forming. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She fiddled with the coffee sleeve. "I don't know where to start," she whispered. "I hate how I handled everything. I'm sorry for lying. I'm sorry for hurting you." I let the silence stretch. My stomach churned with a strange mix of anger and pity. Eventually I said, "Why did you want to see me?" She looked out the window at the cars passing by, chewing her lip. "Because I can't live with this bitterness," she said, voice trembling. "I know we can't go back, but I need to know if you can ever forgive me." I stared at her, a dull ache spreading through my chest. Forgiveness. That word hammered in my head. Could I even manage that? Should I? Images of her and James in a hotel room flashed through my mind, and my fists clenched under the table. Then I saw a vision of us dancing at our wedding, my hand on her waist, her laughter bright and carefree. So many memories, so many regrets. "I don't know," I said finally, my tone flat. "I really don't." Her tears spilled over. She tried to wipe them away. She looked so small, so unlike the polished, driven Samantha who used to stride around with unwavering confidence. A pang of something, maybe old tenderness, maybe just residual pity, squeezed my heart. We sat in an uncomfortable silence. Then she murmured, "James is out of the company. He's gone. I don't even know where he's staying." Everything fell apart fast. I arched an eyebrow, uncertain how to respond. A swirl of conflicting emotions flickered inside me. Relief, justification, sorrow. "So that's it?" I asked, Voice monotone. He just vanished. She nodded slowly, tears still on her cheeks. Yes, and it doesn't fix anything. I made a choice. I thought I wanted excitement. Someone who... She trailed off, shaking her head. I was foolish. I stared at the table. I recalled the man I used to be, the knave groom who believed in an unbreakable bond. That man was gone. I felt older, more jaded, but also strangely liberated from illusions. "You have not changed," I said at last, echoing the accusation that had haunted my thoughts for days. "You wanted something else. You took it. Now you're left with regret. That's who you are." She pressed trembling fingers to her lips, stifling a sob. The bitterness in my voice was a lash, and I knew it hurt her. Part of me relished that. Part of me wanted to be done with hurting. "Michael," she whispered, "I understand if you never want to see me again." I let out a ragged breath and glanced around the coffee shop. A few patrons were staring, but quickly turned away. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I repeated, "but I can move on. And that's what I plan to do." She nodded through her tears. I stood abruptly, tossed a few bills on the table for her coffee, and turned to leave. I didn't say goodbye, just walked out into the chilly evening air, tears burning at the corners of my eyes. That night, back home, I sat at my desk. I flipped through the pages I'd written, that raw book about my pain and betrayal. Everything from the wedding day to discovering the affair, to the stinging humiliations, the recorded confessions. I had typed every detail, each page an exorcism of my agony. But now, flipping through it, I realized it also contained something like hope. A recognition that yes, I was destroyed. But in that destruction, I'd found a new kind of strength. I wasn't that gullible fool anymore. I made a choice. I wouldn't publish it, wouldn't share it with the world. This was mine. My testament, my confession. A personal relic of a battle fought and survived. The next morning, I stuffed the manuscript into a box, taped it shut, and shoved it into a closet. Part of me wanted to burn it, but not yet. Maybe I needed to remember how it felt to be so broken. I took a leave of absence from my job, went to stay with my folks up in Buffalo for a few weeks, told them I needed a breather. My mother fussed, cooking homemade meals. My father quietly offered me space. They didn't pry, though they both knew something serious had happened. As I walked the old streets of my childhood, the crisp wind biting my face, I felt a sense of clarity. Maybe it was the winter air, or the unconditional love in that small house. Maybe it was the knowledge that I could still stand on my own 2 feet. On a whim, I drove to the place along Lake Erie where we used to fish when I was a kid. The gray waves rolled in, cold and endless. I stood there, remembering how I used to cast my line with my dad, the excitement I felt with each nibble. I recalled that sense of optimism, that wide-eyed belief in the future. Strange how life circles back, forcing you to confront old dreams with new scars. Eventually, I felt ready. I returned home, back to the empty shell of the house we'd shared. Samantha's keys were on the table, along with a note. "We should finalize the divorce. I'll wait for your word." Short, clipped, the final step. I took a deep breath, dialed my lawyer, and set the wheels in motion. The legalities were straightforward, mostly because we had no children. We split the assets, the house, everything. A cold process that put a neat label on heartbreak. After the last of the paperwork, I walked out, arms full of boxes, leaving behind the illusions that once defined me. In the weeks that followed, I immersed myself in writing again. This time, not about betrayal, but about a future. I wrote new stories, rediscovered the fragments of me that existed before I ever met her. Sometimes at night, I'd jerk awake with that old pain pounding in my chest, the dream of emptiness still lingering like a bad hangover. But gradually, the hold of that despair loosened. And then came the day I realized I didn't have to die. I considered it, let the thoughts seduce me in the darkest hours, but it was an illusion like all the rest. It would solve nothing and only prove how thoroughly the betrayal had beaten me. Instead, I stood under the shower, letting the hot water wash over me, and decided I would live. And living would be the best revenge of all. A few months later, I received a call from James's old coworker, letting me know that James was rumored to have left town for some new opportunity on the West Coast. Good riddance, I thought, though I felt none of the satisfaction I expected. He was just a man chasing excitement. I'd been a stepping stone in his path of impulsive conquests. Let him go. I still had a life to rebuild. Not long after, Samantha reached out one last time, wanting to see how I was doing. I refused to meet her in person. Too many raw memories. But I spoke to her on the phone in a flat voice, letting her hear that I was calm, centered, and no longer floundering. She sounded relieved and sad, offering another apology. I ended the call with a quiet "take care" and hung up. There was no big Hollywood ending, no triumphant victory parade. Just me, standing on the threshold of an empty house, setting one foot in front of the other. I sold that place soon after, packed my things, and found an apartment across town with a view of the Cuyahoga River. It was smaller, quieter, but it was mine. And in those silent, solitary evenings, I learned to breathe again. The nightmares still came sometimes. Memories of the wedding, the smell of his cologne on her clothes, the echo of her whispered confession. But each time, I forced myself to wake up, to remind myself, you survived. You're stronger than your own despair. On the final day of that tumultuous chapter, I took the ring off my finger, placed it in a small box, and tucked it away alongside the manuscript I'd written about our downfall. I locked them both in the closet, a private memorial to the man I used to be. Then I stared at the empty space on my ring finger, feeling oddly liberated. That's when I stepped outside for a walk, letting the crisp morning air fill my lungs. Life stretched ahead, uncertain but full of possibilities, and I realized, with a surprising surge of hope, that I was okay. Not happy yet, not healed entirely, but okay. I had clawed my way out of the pit of betrayal. I had discovered that even when the worst pain rips you apart, you can rebuild yourself. I'd been destroyed, but in that destruction, I found a part of me that would never again be naive. I'd learned my own strength, and as I walked along the street, each footstep felt like a promise to keep going, to keep building, to keep living. That was my final act of defiance against the ghosts of our broken vows. The city lights shimmered ahead, and for the first time in years, I felt I could take on whatever came next. I turned a corner and disappeared into the crowds, a new man with nothing but my own willpower guiding me forward. My final thought, as I glanced at the early morning sun edging over the rooftops, was simple. Sometimes you have to burn to discover what remains when the smoke clears. And what remained, in my case, was someone who wouldn't be destroyed so easily again.